Hello everyone, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today I am going to be learning with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. And in today's case, it is definitely going to be a furry friend of ours, maybe even a slightly spiky friend of ours, because we are covering the oh so wonderful giant anteater. This is a very, very special listener episode dedicated to Lottie and Aubrey, who actually wrote in for the more general umbrella term of anteater. But because we have already covered one sort of anteater, which is the Tamandua, we just made it a bit more specific. So thank you, Lottie and Aubrey, for your wonderful suggestion. Boy, did I have fun researching this creature, and I am excited to get into it. So thank you for writing in and for the great suggestion. If there is an animal that you would really like to learn about and you'd like to have your own episode, please reach out to the show, and you can do so in one of three ways. You can send a message to the Instagram Relax with Animal Facts. You can go on relaxwithanimalfacts.com and click on the Animal Request tab, which many of you have been using, and that is so awesome to see. And the last way is to send an email directly to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. I respond to any of these three ways. I look forward to all of your messages. I always get so giddy when I get new ones. Let me just say where I got my facts from for this episode so we can get straight into it. I got my facts from animals.sandiegozoo.org, nationalzoo.si.edu, edgeofexistence.org, britannica.com, and lastly, for the name of the animal, etimonline.com. As always, I will be leaving these resources in the show notes or the description of the episode. So if you are curious to do some more learning on your own about the giant anteater, or maybe about another animal, I encourage you to go to those resources, because without them, this episode would not have been possible. And before we begin our journey into the forests to see this giant anteater, I want all of you to notice maybe where you are carrying some tension. Is it in the hands? Is it in the head? The most common seems to be the shoulders, where even when we think we are relaxed, our shoulders are up halfway, as if they are trying to compete in a competition with the head, of which can be taller. But that competition can be put to a rest, at least for now. Try right along with me to relax those tense portions of your body as we go into this immersive experience with me, Steph Wolf, into the tropical forests where the giant anteater resides. The giant anteater, first of all, is an animal that is so incredibly unique when it comes to physical characteristics and to general anatomical structure. There is an allure of these creatures just because of their peculiarity. They look almost fantastical, or something that you might find in a fairy tale picture book, but the animal kingdom really is full of creatures like this, in which they display this sort of artistry that provokes us to a serious appreciation, and that is no exception with the giant anteater. The scientific name of the giant anteater was given to it very specifically to sabotage my pronunciation on the show, and it is Myrmecophaga tridactyla. The distinction that I prefer is the ant bear. And there is certainly a reason why it is called the ant bear sometimes. It is the largest of the 4 anteater species. So that means that when it comes to the umbrella term of anteater. Underneath that umbrella are 4 separate anteater species, of which the giant anteater is part of. It is called the giant anteater because it reaches lengths of 6 to 8 feet, making it officially on average taller than the average human being. It will also weigh up to 55 kilograms. These ant bears are native to Central and South America, where they feed on tiny termites and ants using their 2-foot-long tongue, which they will sort of flick in and out of their mouth up to 150 times per minute. No matter how far we stick our tongues out as human beings, the giant anteater will have us beat tenfold. So while they are found throughout Central and South America, there are a certain number of places in which they are not. Those places are Uruguay, Guatemala, and El Salvador, where they are considered to be extinct. But in the rest of South and Central America, they will be enjoying their abodes in the wetlands, the grasslands, and the tropical forests, which is where we are today. The very distinctive feature besides their 2-foot-long tongue is, of course, their very long snout. That 2-foot-long tongue needs to be somewhere. It needs to be locked and loaded before it is ready to go out and scoop up ants. This long snout of theirs also has a very peculiar ability when it comes to their sense of smell. Their hearing is not the best, neither is their sight, but their sense of smell, some articles write, can be up to 50 times that of a human person. We see this often in the animal kingdom, in which an animal will be slightly more disadvantaged in one way, but highly advantaged in another. It can seem sometimes as if it is a give and take, in which one animal might have incredibly superior eyesight, but maybe not so good in the hearing department. Just last episode with the hummingbird, with an incredible capacity in terms of flying all sorts of ways, being able to stay themselves in midair to get that nectar, but then they can't even hop or walk around. They do a little shuffle. And so it is with the giant anteater. Fantastic smell. They could probably smell Swiss cheese and know what city in Switzerland it's from, but when it comes to hearing and sight, we will as humans have a bit of advantage. The giant anteater has a very distinct pattern with different shades of brown with these black stripes that will be very wide and will run all the way from their upper front legs toward their spine. And right towards the back of the spine is of course going to be where their bushy tail is going to be sprouting from, and their front legs are going to be white in color. From far away, it might look like the anteater is covered in a nice, solid undercoat of fur, but that is not actually the case. They don't wear undercoats to provide them with that kind of warmth, but instead they will have this short hair that will be a little bit bristly, lining their shoulders, and they will have longer hair on their tail as well as their legs, and the texture has been compared to that of a horse's mane. So if any of you have ridden a horse and have stroked the mane of a horse, you might just know what the hair on a giant anteater's legs feels like. Another remarkable thing about the giant anteater is their claws and how they walk. They actually have these pretty sharp claws, but when they walk, they will tuck them into their palms in order to walk on their front knuckles, sort of like a gorilla. There are certain primates that will walk with their fists or with their palms, but gorillas will walk with their knuckles down onto the ground, and interestingly enough, so will the giant anteater. Their back feet and their claws will be similar to that of bears. but this kind of knuckle walking is only going to be occurring at their front feet. Their back feet are going to have their claws all sprawled out as normal, but when they walk with their forelegs, meaning their front feet, they will be tucking in those razor-sharp front claws into their hands so they can plop their knuckles on the ground as a way of moving around. And when they are moving, they will be generally more slow. And when you see them moving, they will more generally be walking in a slow movement, sometimes a shuffling pattern. But when necessary, they can run, or as this article says, they can gallop, which I love as a verb for the anteater. They can gallop at over 30 miles per hour. That's about 48 kilometers per hour. So the giant anteater, while shuffling and slow most of the time, they can kick it into hyperdrive, turn on the nitrous, and really be able to run incredibly fast. In addition to this, they will be adept climbers and swimmers. Their claws are going to give them an advantage in terms of climbing the dry bark, so they have something to dig into, and they will be able to doggy paddle their way through the water. What might be helpful is to name the other anteaters that are part of that anteater category. The one we are covering today, which is the giant anteater. There is also the silky anteater, the northern tamandua, and the southern tamandua. We have covered the tamandua in a previous episode, so feel free to cross off another anteater from the list after this episode. Because the name of this creature seems to be a little bit on the nose or kind of obvious, we are going to be covering in the etymology section the word ant rather than giant anteater. So let's get into why exactly they have this name. While the giant anteater has no teeth whatever, they do have that specialized tongue that, remember, is over 2 feet in length sometimes, which will allow them to eat up to 30,000 ants and termites each day. Now, some of us, when we were children, and even some of us into adulthood, prefer to steer clear of certain things like green veggies, certain things like broccoli or cauliflower. But how would you like to eat up to 30,000 ants and termites each day instead? I bet the celery is sounding pretty great after that comparison. Their tube-shaped snout is really perfectly designed to feed on ants and termites. They have that very narrow snout with their additionally narrow tongue, and it is going to be able to really slosh around inside tight spaces to collect all of the ants and the termites it can. This article describes the shape of the giant anteater's tongue as a strand of spaghetti. It looks to me to be a very thick strand of spaghetti, maybe more like an udon noodle. But when their tongue goes into those tiny crevices, there is a reason why the termites or the ants can be collected onto their tongue, especially on the way back, instead of just sliding around and nothing happening. Their tongues have these very small, backward-pointing spines, almost like a natural kind of barbed wire that will be covered in sticky saliva that will trap the ants or the termites onto their tongue until they go back 2 feet, of course, into their mouth. And one thing that is also pretty amazing is that research has found that giant anteaters can identify a particular species of ant or termite by smell before they rip apart a nest. And remember, their smell can be up to 50 times that of our own. I only wonder how this research was done and how this conclusion came to be. Maybe there are certain ants that the giant anteater prefers or some nests that it won't mess with. I am not entirely sure, but that is pretty cool. The lifespan of the giant anteater is actually unknown in the wild, but they can live up to 26 years in human care. So whenever we take the lifespan of an animal in the wild and compare it to that of the animal in captivity, we will always find a general trend of the creature living longer in captivity than in the wild. This is because their natural forms of predation have been taken away. They are given all the food they want, carte blanche access to those 30,000 ants and termites a day instead of having to run around and collect them themselves. And they also have access to medicinal care, whereas in the wild, if they get sick, that could mean they won't be able to hunt and to eat as often, and it might really mean a lot of trouble. So we can surmise that possibly the giant anteater in the wild would have a lifespan of something between 15 to 20 years. That is a total speculative conclusion, but following the general trends that we have seen on the show, in which an animal will live about a third less in the wild than in human care, I would not be surprised by that statistic. Giant anteaters prefer their alone time. They are generally solitary creatures, but there are some things that they do indeed come together for, and that is for the mating season. When a mother is caring for her young, she does not typically make permanent nests or resting spots and will likely wander throughout the ranges. The ranges of these creatures will differ slightly between male and female. That is about 1 square mile or about 1.6 square kilometers for adult males, and about 1.5 square miles, which is just under 2.5 square kilometers for adult females. So we see that the adult females will actually take more space. Their ranges will be bigger than the adult males. And after the little giant anteater is born, the pup never really leaves its mother for the first 4 weeks of its life. The giant anteater is not a very vocal creature, but the pup can let out a shrill if necessary, or for what it deems as necessary, oftentimes to alert its mum when it is in distress. The pup is going to be weaned for about 9 months of its life and will usually leave its mother when it is full grown at about 2 years of age. So now let us move to the etymology. Because we already learned why this creature is called a giant anteater, it is a big creature that eats ants after all, we are going to talk about the noun ant. And that technical term, noun, is one that can be sometimes confusing and might benefit us if we just define it. A noun is typically described, of course, as a person, a place, or a thing, and an ant is a thing after all. But there are things that are nouns that don't exactly fall square into these categories, unless you take thing to be very, very broad and general. One example would be the word idea. Is idea a noun? Is it a person? Is it a place? Is it a thing? Nouns also cover things like concepts. One way of knowing if something is a noun or not is just to place the word my before it. If it doesn't sound funky and it sounds just right, it's a noun. So things like my aunt, my giant anteater, my idea. The reason why I always cover certain things is that I never want to assume that somebody listening knows exactly what the definition of a noun is or what the definition of nocturnal or diurnal means. It is much more conducive to learning when we understand and define our terms. So let's cover the etymology of the word ant, which is smack down in the middle of giant anteater. So this word, how it is spelt now, was first used in the 1500s after shortening the Middle English word amped, that is A-M-P-T-E, and it will go all the way back to a Germanic word which will mean to cut. Therefore, the insect's name, the ant, etymologically really means the biter off. So ants indeed do bite things off, especially certain species can give some really nasty bites. So that means that the anteater is the biter of the biter-offs, which is pretty cool. Again, this creature has a certain sort of glamour to it, just because of how odd and peculiar they look and how it makes them unique and beautiful as creatures. Thank you again, Lottie and Aubrey, for the fantastic suggestion. I hope you enjoyed your episode, and for those of you that want to learn more about a particular animal, please send a message to Relax with Animal Facts on Instagram, or you can go to the relaxwithanimalfacts.com website and click on the Animal Request tab, and you can always email directly to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. Without your suggestions, this podcast episode would not have been possible, neither would the previous 100-something episodes. You guys are what make the show, and for that I am very grateful. And let me just move to the review portion of the show, in which I read the reviews posted typically to Apple Podcasts, but really wherever you listen. So we are going to read today from a very special listener named Map with $2 who wrote on Apple Podcasts all the way from the United States of America. It is so cool that I have reviews from Great Britain and Australia and the United States and Canada. It is quite wonderful that all of us from all around the world can come together and learn about animals. And Map writes, "Hi, this podcast is such a safe place for those suffering, like me, from anxiety. I recently decided to continue my education and my nerves have been all over the place. At the end of my day or on my drive home, I can put on this podcast and root myself while learning cool facts. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Please feature the fruit bat on one of your episodes. Thanks for the great content." Thank you, Map, for leaving such a kind review and of sharing how the podcast helps you. I'm so grateful to be a part of your driving routine. I'm glad you found the show, Map, and that you were a part of our animal podcast family. If you want to leave a review like Map did and say why you like the show, it truly is one of the greatest ways that you can give back if the show has been a help to you. But as I say every time, your listenership already is gift enough. So any extra reviews, any Patreon support, or anything of the sort is all a matter of generosity on your part, and of which I can see that you guys are incredibly generous with your reviews and with your kind words. Thank you again for listening to this podcast episode. I would like to add another segment to the show after the reviews, something like reading your guys' stories about maybe an animal experience that you had or something of the like. So if you have any funny stories to do with animals, or if you have an interesting story of how you found the podcast or anything like that, please send in a message. And if you want to request an animal, you can do all of that in the same message if you so choose. Thank you all again for joining me, and I shall see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.